All right, let's really dig into this. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the fascinating and often surprising shifts happening across the political landscape right now. You've sent us quite a stack of sources, a mix of recent news reports, some raw poll data covering everything from, internal party squabbles to some truly strategic electoral chess moves.
Yeah, what's striking here, I think, is how interconnected these seemingly disconnected events truly are. Our mission, really, is to pull out the most important insights, helping you quickly grasp the tricky dynamics, these unexpected challenges, and the strategic thinking behind the political plays as we head towards upcoming elections.
And speaking of tricky dynamics, let's start with a big one. Donald Trump's own base. You'd think he'd have them firmly in his corner, but we're seeing some unexpected friction points causing real annoyance. Maybe not bolting yet, but definitely annoyance. What are you seeing as the major challenges for him right now from that base?
Well, one of the first things that jumps out is the tension around immigration. His MAGA base clearly wants mass deportations, get everyone out. But the sources show corporate farmers have quietly warned Trump that if he actually pulled that off, food production would basically collapse.
Collapse. Wow.
Yeah, sending prices soaring a nightmare, economically speaking, like echoes of past inflation crises. So it's probably no coincidence we're already seeing a pullback on raids at farms and big hotels, places owned by powerful corporations.
So a pragmatic, kind of behind-the-scenes adjustment, maybe, but one that's clearly not sitting well with some of his most vocal supporters. We're hearing accusations of amnesty thrown around.
Absolutely. Trump's comments back in Iowa suggesting protection for some migrants instantly ignited a firestorm. You've got figures like Steve Bannon, Joe Rogan, Charlie Kirk,
The big names.
right, loudly accusing him of amnesty, and these accusations are just amplified everywhere on social media.
Yeah.
The insight here, I think, is Trump has to keep those farm workers in place to avoid a full-blown inflation crisis.
Yeah.
Because, as the sources clearly state, native-born Americans just aren't willing to do that work for the same wages.
Yeah.
It puts him in a real bind.
A bind, yeah. And it's not just policy where he's facing internal pressure. We're also seeing this Jeffrey Epstein video situation bubbling up again. The administration released footage from outside Epstein's jail cell, but the digital clock bizarrely jumps from 11:58 p.m. straight to 12:000 a.m., this missing minute.
Ah, the missing minute.
It's turbocharged conspiracy theories among the base about Epstein's death and, who he might have been silenced to protect.
That's a fascinating and really potent example of how distrust, which is a narrative Trump often cultivates, right?
Yeah.
How it can boomerang back and undermine his own administration when transparency is perceived to falter. It just adds another layer of complexity to managing his coalition.
And then there's Ukraine. Trump has actually criticized Vladimir Putin recently and even said he'd send more weapons to Ukraine.
Which is unexpected for some.
Exactly. It flies directly in the face of parts of his base who are far more sympathetic to Russia and, frankly, don't want to support Ukraine's freedom. It's a lot of conflicting signals. One person close to him was quoted saying, "I will tell you right now, MAGA has never been in more turmoil than the last 72 hours.
Wow. 72 hours.
Yeah. He's apparently hoping his talk about tariffs might distract from these issues. That doesn't seem to be landing with his base either. They're not really focused on tariffs.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, these internal tensions aren't just about, balancing campaign promises with the messy realities of governing. This really highlights the core paradox of Trump's populist appeal.
Yeah.
He needs corporate power to avoid economic fallout, but his base often despises that same corporate influence.
A real contradiction.
It puts him in a kind of no-win bind that could, over time, potentially fracture his coalition.
Speaking of tariffs, the Congressional Republicans are far from happy either. Trump gave himself, 90 days to cut trade deals with 200 countries?
Yeah, an ambitious goal.
And after all that time, there are only two tentative agreements, one with the UK and one with Vietnam. So he then unilaterally slapped steep tariffs, like 25% and up on over a dozen countries, effective August 1st. And the blowback from businesses is hitting Congressional Republicans hard now. They're hearing it.
Well, yeah, and this begs the question, what kind of allies do you cultivate when you're picking a trade fight, basically on your own?
Yeah.
Senator Tom Tillis, a Republican from North Carolina, put it pretty bluntly. He said, if you're going to go into a trade war, it's good to have allies. What we did is alienate the ones we know are naturally inclined to work with us.
Alienating allies. Not ideal.
Not ideal. And Senator Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia is pushing for full transparency on these trade talks once the agreement's public. And Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, he summed up the widespread uncertainty. We're in uncharted territory. I do not know the impact the tariffs are going to have on the American economy or the global economy. I don't, and nobody else does either.
Nobody knows. That sounds like a chorus of concern, really. These senators are clearly worried that continuous Taco Tuesday,
Taco Tuesday, yeah.
as they're calling these ongoing trade actions creating uncertainty, will spook markets, erode belief in Trump, maybe even trigger a recession next year, and ultimately cost Republicans seats in the House and Senate. And from what we're seeing, Trump seems to be largely ignoring their concerns.
Pretty much seems that way. And this economic friction, it isn't limited to trade,
Mhm.
which, raises an important question. What's truly behind Trump's intense desire to fire Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, his own appointee?
You acquainted him.
Trump is demanding Powell lower interest rates or resign. He even sent a letter. Powell, for his part, is holding firm. He understands that slashing rates now would likely ignite inflation and send the dollar plunging. Plus, it's actually unclear if Trump even has the legal power to fire him.
And his real estate background surely plays into this. The sources point out that his real estate projects, still run by Eric and Donald Jr., are heavily dependent on low interest rates. Developers would love 0% if they could get it right.
Oh, absolutely. But there might be a deeper game being played here.
Yeah, okay.
Lael Brainard, a former Fed governor, suggests Trump's real goal isn't just about his family businesses. It's potentially a massive play to hide the effect of his budget-busting bill, the BBB,
The BBB.
which created a staggering $4 trillion in new debt. The thinking is, for every point Powell knocks off the interest rate, the government saves hundreds of billions over 10 years.
Hundreds of billions.
Yeah. So a 3% cut, say from 4% to 1%, could save the government well over $1 trillion over a decade. He's trying to offset massive spending, essentially. What's often overlooked here, or maybe just disregarded, is the direct link between cutting rates and sparking inflation, and completely disregarding the Fed's crucial independence.
So it's that classic political dilemma, isn't it, where every solution creates a new problem for someone else. People with variable rate mortgages, credit card debt, student loans, they want low rates. But seniors relying on savings income, they want high rates.
Exactly. And high interest rates also strengthen the dollar, which benefits huge importers like Walmart. There's just no way to please everyone.
No easy answer.
Not really. And speculation about potential replacements for Powell, it centers on a couple of Kevins.
The Kev.
Yeah, Kevin Hassett, who directs the National Economic Council. He's apparently expressed interest. And Kevin Warsh, a former Fed governor who's publicly criticized Powell. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is another possibility.
Yeah.
But the real insight here, I think, is that any new Fed chairman, once confirmed, is supposed to balance inflation and unemployment. Their job isn't to make Trump look good or cut federal interest payments.
Right. It's supposed to be independent.
Supposed to be. So slashing rates and igniting inflation would likely just lead to Trump blaming and potentially trying to fire the new chairman all over again. It's kind of a recurring cycle.
Okay, so from tariffs to interest rates, economic policy is clearly a massive point of friction. Beyond these immediate financial concerns, we're also seeing these persistent efforts to push through another massive spending bill, another reconciliation bill.
Yeah, and what's truly remarkable here is the persistence, right? Trying to pass another one, especially given how incredibly unpopular the first one proved to be. Just a quick reminder for everyone, reconciliation is that legislative process that allows certain budget-related bills to pass the Senate with just a simple majority, bypassing the usual 60-vote filibuster.
Right, the loophole, essentially.
Kind of. And Senator Mike Crapo, a Republican from Idaho, he wants another megabill passed this way. He's hoping the Senate parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough changes her mind on items previously stripped out of the first bill. And Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, he specifically wants to further gut Medicaid, slashing the federal government's 90% share for states that expanded it under the ACA. He actually threatened to vote no on the first bill before caving.
Right, I remember that.
And House Budget Chairman Jody Arrington of Texas also supports another bill with, quote, leftovers from the first. He suggested starting maybe this fall.
But the first bill was such a nightmare to pass, wasn't it? Took half a year, tons of arm twisting, and it remains deeply unpopular, starting a second one in September. That could easily bleed into 2026, which is an election year. House members must be extremely hesitant about that.
Oh, definitely. Its possibility really hinges entirely on whether Trump throws his full weight behind it. And the poll data we have, it just confirms how unpopular that first bill really is.
So what does the data show?
Well, the YouGov poll data paints a pretty clear and frankly grim picture for the incumbent party. Only 35% of people approve of the Megabill, while a significant 53% oppose it. That's not good.
Not good at all.
And on the broader direction of the country question, sentiment is overwhelmingly negative. Only 34% think things are headed the right way, compared to 57% who believe it's the wrong direction. That's usually a very bad sign for the party in power heading into House elections.
Wow, okay. What about specifics like healthcare?
Yeah, when you look at specific funding areas, voters overwhelmingly want more support for healthcare. 49% want more Medicaid funding. And Democrats are poised to highlight a potential trillion-dollar cut over a decade from the Republican plans.
$1 trillion.
Medicare is even more popular. 56% want more funding for Medicare, only 8% want less. Even SNAP, food stamps, sees 41% wanting increased funding versus only 20% wanting less.
Okay, so people want these programs funded. What about the overall impact of the bill?
Well, when asked if the bill will help or hurt the average American, a majority, 52%, think it will actually hurt them. Only 28% think it will help.
Ouch.
Yeah. And on tariffs, only a small fraction, 20%, want increases. 40% actually want them decreased. And the real kicker, a full 72% expect tariffs to increase prices.
72%. That makes new tariffs a very tough sell for Trump.
Extremely tough. His own job approval is also underwater in this poll. 53% disapprove compared to 42% approving. That's 11 points underwater.
And just for context.
For a quick comparison, Elon Musk's favorability is even lower, 28 points underwater, 32% favorable, 60% unfavorable.
Okay. And what are the top issues people care about right now, according to this poll?
Top three are inflation at 21%, the economy generally at 13%, and healthcare also at 13%. Those are the big ones.
Inflation, economy, healthcare. Got it. That's a lot of challenging data to contend with. It makes you wonder how some figures are attempting to, control the narrative or build their own platforms in the face of all this.
Right. And what's truly interesting here is how major figures like Donald Trump and Elon Musk are navigating this complex media and political landscape. Sometimes, frankly, with what appears to be a clear misunderstanding of fundamental political principles. Let's take Trump's social media company deal with Newsmax first. The sources indicate Trump primarily views the presidency as a vehicle for making money, crypto, Bibles, sneakers, whatever. His social media company, DJT, represents significant paper value, capitalized at $5 billion, and Trump owns about half.
$5 billion? That's a lot of paper.
It is. Though cashing in without crashing the stock would be tricky. This deal with Newsmax seems clearly aimed at boosting DJT stock.
And it's quite an aggressive play, isn't it? His media company, TMTG, just launched Truth Plus So, this worldwide streaming platform. It's set to feature almost exclusively content from Newsmax, which is that far-right news company run by his friend Chris Ruddy.
Who also happens to be Newsmax's largest shareholder.
Yeah.
Convenient.
Right. The entire platform will be Trump-friendly, America First, designed as a home for conservatives and, quote, non-woke viewers. Apps available globally.
Yeah, and what's curious is Trump emphasized this worldwide availability, seemingly unaware, or maybe ignoring, that much of the world hates him bitterly, as one source put it.
So the international audience might be small.
Microscopic, probably.
Yeah.
Any significant U.S. audience might just come from those who can't get Newsmax on their cable package already.
And this kind of media venture, where a sitting president holds a major stake, it does raise real ethical questions, doesn't it, about fair and balanced coverage?
Oh, absolutely. It could even make Fox News look like a paragon of impartiality in comparison. Serious concerns there.
Okay, shifting gears to another major figure trying to shake things up, Elon Musk. Let's talk about what he doesn't seem to grasp about third parties. I mean, lots of Americans are fed up with both major parties, that's clear. But simply starting another third party isn't really the solution, is it? There are tons of them already.
That's the key point. There's a more fundamental issue that needs fixing first. The immediate hurdles for any new party are just immense. Take ballot access.
Yeah.
Simply getting on the ballot in all 50 states is incredibly difficult due to all these arcane rules, and the major parties actively fight tooth and nail to keep new contenders off.
Right, they protect their turf.
Exactly. Then there's the first-past-the-post system we have. In single-district systems, especially for the House, a third-party candidate needs to get more votes than any other single candidate, not just a decent percentage.
More than the Democrat and more than the Republican individually.
Right. For president, they need more electoral votes than both. Think about Ross Perot in 1992. Got 19% of the popular vote.
19%. Huge number.
Huge.
Yeah.
But 0 electoral votes. George Wallace in 68 got 46 electoral votes, but he was very much a regional candidate. It's incredibly hard.
So if Musk truly wanted to drive change, his energy and, frankly, his money would be far better spent focusing on changing the underlying laws, right?
Absolutely. For example, he could advocate for proportional representation for the House. Elect all House members statewide, maybe.
Mm.
Parties get seats proportional to their vote share. If a party got, say, 10% nationwide, they could actually win maybe 40 House seats. This is common practice in many other democratic countries.
Makes sense. What about for president?
Another impactful change could be pushing for fusion voting for presidential campaigns. That's where multiple parties can nominate the same candidate and all their votes are added together.
Oh, interesting.
It used to be common here, and still exists in New York and Connecticut for all offices. It lets a voter support a smaller party, show their preference, without feeling like they're wasting their vote or endangering their second choice. You could vote, say, Working Families Party for Kamala Harris or Conservative Party for Donald Trump. A party getting even 10–15% of the vote that way becomes a major political force.
But that requires changing laws, which takes time and effort.
And that's the real insight, isn't it? Musk seems to lack the patience for that long, tedious process. So unfortunately, his current efforts and money are likely, as the source says, to come to naught.
Likely to fizzle out. Okay. Beyond these individual players, how are the actual parties gearing up? Especially when it comes to the big money in politics. We're hearing about record-breaking fundraising from the Republican Senate Super PAC.
Yeah, this really highlights the strategic shifts happening in political funding. The Senate Leadership Fund, or SLF, that's the main Republican Senate Super PAC. Remember, these groups can raise and spend unlimited money.
Right, the independent expenditure groups.
Exactly. They raised an astonishing $85 million in the first half of 2025. That's double the previous record for an off-year first half.
Double the record, wow.
Huge numbers. It's a very strong start and certainly a big win for the new Senate Majority Leader John Thune. But what's also notable is the leadership change within the SLF. It's now run by Alex Latcham and Cory Gardner, and they're working in close cooperation with Donald Trump. That's a stark contrast to its past leadership under Stephen Law, who was a close Mitch McConnell ally.
Ah, the power shift.
Yeah, the sentiment is clear. Trumpish guys do better now than McConnellish guys.
And how are they planning to spend all that money? Any changes in strategy?
Yes, the SLF plans to spend money much earlier than normal this cycle. And there's a greater focus on digital and streaming platforms. They're trying to reach those non-traditional, often younger voters who don't watch regular TV but maybe showed up for Trump in 2024. The goal is to mobilize them for the 2026 midterms.
Mobilize them early. Okay, so where is that money going to be deployed? Are any specific races already getting early attention?
Well, looking at the broader implications, it's all about strategic targeting, right? And some states are already showing signs of vulnerability for Republicans, prompting that early investment. For instance, the SLF is already advertising in Nebraska.
Nebraska? Why Nebraska?
Because Senator Pete Ricketts, the Republican incumbent, has a surprisingly low approval rating, just 38%. His challenger is independent Dan Osborne. He's a former union leader who actually put up an impressive showing back in 2024, getting 47% of the vote against Senator Deb Fischer.
47% as an independent. That's strong.
Very strong. He's now running against Ricketts. He's much better known this time around, and he expects more out-of-state money to flow in.
So it's shaping up to be a compelling narrative there, isn't it? Osborne, the mechanic, framing it as the ordinary working guy against the son of a billionaire.
Exactly. That's the frame. And with Trump not on the ticket in 2026, some marginal Republicans might just stay home. What's also interesting strategically, Democrats are likely to hold back from running their own candidate. They'll probably direct their voters to support Osborne instead.
Consolidate the opposition.
Right. And Osborne has pledged not to caucus with either party if he wins. So picture this. If Republicans end up with 49 Senate seats, Democrats with 50, and Osborne wins Nebraska, he would actually wield enormous power.
The deciding vote.
Potentially. And that's a prospect Nebraska voters might just favor, given his independent stance. It makes Nebraska suddenly very interesting.
Very interesting indeed. Okay, and on the Democratic side, the DCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, they have their own strategic focus, right? Something about rural hospitals.
That's right. The recent Megabill, signed by Donald Trump, it includes changes to funding formulas that may force many rural hospitals to close.
Close entirely? That's huge.
It could be devastating in some areas. So the DCCC plans to strategically target 35 Republican districts where these hospitals are threatened, really exploiting this issue.
How are they doing that?
Ads have already started running and could continue indefinitely. They're using a very straightforward, impactful message. Congressman X voted for a bill that may force your beloved local hospital to close due to lack of federal funds. Time to get rid of him.
Direct and potent, especially in rural areas.
Incredibly potent, especially where the nearest alternative hospital could be 100 miles away. This hits home. The ads will also highlight that, starting in 2027, millions of people are projected to lose their Medicaid due to other cuts in the bill.
Even though that's after the midterms.
Right. While those cuts won't actually begin before the 2026 midterms, carefully worded ads can still use scare tactics. Something like, the Republican bill might cause you to lose your health insurance next year. They can use that to lay blame squarely on incumbent Republicans because, frankly, few voters understand the precise details and timelines of these complex legislative changes.
So a powerful, if potentially slightly misleading message based on fear.
Politics often involves shaping perception around complex realities, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Okay, so putting it all together then. We've explored the internal pressures bearing down on Donald Trump from his own base and from Congress. We've looked at the pervasive economic anxieties surrounding interest rates and that deeply unpopular Megabill. We've also dissected the challenges faced by third parties, like Musk's efforts, and the really strategic positioning of political funding and electoral tactics as we look toward upcoming elections.
Yeah, the sources today collectively reveal a political landscape that's just in constant, often unpredictable flux. We've seen various actors trying to navigate and, frankly, sometimes exploit these rapid changes. From, base revolt to record-breaking fundraising, it really is a complex interplay of power, policy, and that ever-shifting public perception.
The consistent thread running through all these narratives seems to be unpredictability, doesn't it? And this relentless battle for influence. It really shows how even seemingly small policy changes, or like you said, individual races like the one in Nebraska, can have potentially massive electoral consequences down the line. So as you, our listener, consider all this, maybe think about how these specific detailed skirmishes, like the fate of rural hospitals or that single independent Senate candidate in Nebraska, might actually ripple outwards and ultimately determine the balance of power for years to come. What seemingly local issue in your area could be the next flashpoint that unexpectedly changes the national political conversation. Something to think about.